Welcome. In this video, I would like to discuss how forms are used in SUPERText. And I'm proceeding on the assumption that the forms are already created for you. There is another video that discusses how to create forms in SUPERText. But in this video, we will look at how we use the forms that have been created for us. And typically, it's a SUPERText administrator that creates the numerous forms that are used in numerous projects. What are forms? Forms are one of the ways that you work with fields in SUPERText. So when you're interested in the fields or categories of information associated with a record, you will be working with a form. And there are numerous areas where forms are used in SUPERText, so let's take a look at some of them. Likely the most common way in which you will work with forms in SUPERText is when you're working with a search results list. So if I open up a search window and perform a query, here's my results list, in this case 37 records, and one of the tools that's available at the bottom here is Open Form. So if I select a search result, I'll select the first one, I click Open Form, I get a form. If I select a different result, I may get the same form with different data obviously, or I may get a different form. In this case, I open up a different form. We'll see a little bit later how SUPERText decides which form to show you for which search result. The other way, when working with search windows, is double-clicking on a result could open up a form. Now that depends on what you've selected under File Settings for your double-click in results list action. Do you want to open a form or do you want to open up a document record? There's another video that discusses document records, but we'll work with forms now. The quick examples I just showed you were examples of forms used with document records. In my particular example, we have 37 document records that were retrieved. I can see that the first document record happens to have page records. I can see that because of the yellow in the icon associated with that search result. I can open up a page records window, for example, using this tool, and all of the page records associated with this particular document record come up. In this case, it's only one, and I can view, using the Open Form tool, forms associated with this page record. So here I'm using a form with a page record. I can also use forms in SUPERText to view the fields associated with a new document record. So let me do a query. And there are 4 new document records categorized as photographs. So if I double click here, or if I open up using the Open Form tool, I'm now seeing a form that shows the fielded information in a new document record. In this particular case, the new document record type or docrec type is a photograph. Forms are also used in SUPERText to view or work with records in Key Lookup Tables. Let me show you an example of that. If I do that query and I open up the form associated with that search result, so this form is now showing me the data in the document record retrieved by the search result. If I go to the Links tab, I see we have a Subjects Key Lookup area. We'll discuss that in a minute. If I double click there, SUPERText will open up what's called the Key Lookup table, and I see that I have a form tool available here, either to view data associated with that Key Lookup record or to enter a new Key Lookup record. So this demonstrates the use of forms with Key Lookup records, and in my example, the Key Lookup record was associated with a field in the form used to view the document record. Another way that we can work with forms in SUPERText is with tables. So if I open up a table or make a table, I had made one earlier called checks, which contains the checks in my project. I can sort this table or filter it any way I wish. When I want though, I can use this tool, Edit Table with Form, to look through the records in this table using a form. So in this case, I'm not looking at search results, nor am I looking at page records, nor am I looking at new document records necessarily. I'm looking at a collection of records that was put into a table, and I'm navigating through and seeing the fields associated with each row in that table. Irrespective of how you got to the form in SUPERText, and irrespective of the particular design of your form, there are some things that all forms have in common, so let's take a look. First of all, there are pages or tabs on the form. Typically, the form designer, the person making you the form, will have put fields of certain types in different tabs. So in the document tab in this example, I have fields that relate with the record in general. In the notes tab, I have fields that enable me to make notes. In the links tab, I have fields that lets me link it to other types of things, and so forth. So there are tabs, and you use your mouse to change from tab to tab as required. And whatever tab you're on, it will stay on that tab unless you close the form. We have a toolbar at the top right that contains the most frequently used tools on forms. And we also have some tools at the bottom of the form. So let me show you some of these tools. Let's start with the bottom. There is a tag tool. So tagging a record or tagging inside of a form simply identifies the record with a tag in a search results list so that I can do something with the tagged results. Typically, I could put only the tagged ones in a table for some other function. We have a copy document tool, and this enables me to copy the document that I'm currently looking at, or the record I'm currently looking at in this form, to the SUPERText Documents clipboard. So I urge you to take a look at the video on the SUPERText Documents clipboard. There is a way to print the data on the form. So if I wanted all or some of this data printed, I could select that tool. There's also a way to move up and down the search result, or for example, if I was using a table, up and down the table, using these controls. So this control will take me to the next record, and this control will take me up to a previous record. And notice that there is a keyboard shortcut, in this case Control down arrow, and in this case Control up arrow. So if you're a keyboarder, for example, if I happen to be in this field and I don't want to move my hands off the keyboard to use the mouse, I can use Control down arrow to move down or Control up arrow to move up. Furthermore, if I multi-select some items in the list, so I will select, let me do another search over here just for this example. I will select the first item, the sixth one, the ninth one, and I'll go back and reselect the first one to start over there. So if I've multi-selected some items, SUPERText now, when I open up the form, will enable me, or will actually perform the following action. When I go to the next or the previous, it will go to the next or previous among the items I've selected. So you'll see I'm at 191, which is this one. If I go up, I should go up to 170 in this case. And if I look at the title bar, it's 170. If I go up again, we should be at the very top in this case, which is 1002 or quadruple 02. So I can actually select the items in a search result that I'm interested in and then move up and down among those items only. Now let me just go back and show you now in a slightly windowed state a couple of functions that involve SUPERText View when we're working with the form. One function is this tool down here, Synchronize Viewer. Synchronize Viewer, if I do not have the viewer locked using this checkbox, then whenever I land on a record and I want to see the associated document images, if there are some for that record, I can click Synchronize Viewer and it'll show me the images in the view window. Going back up, I'm still seeing the old record. I can say Synchronize Viewer and it will now show me the current record. And notice there's a shortcut or a extra function. If you control click, it will show me the record fitted into the window. On the other hand, if the viewer is locked using this tool, then whenever I move from record to record, the other window, the view window, will automatically synchronize. So I can choose whether I want to lock the viewer all the time or whether I want to leave it unlocked and decide when to view the images associated with the document. When might I do the latter? Well, if I'm quickly reviewing the data on a form, looking for something in particular, and then depending on what I find, I want to view the document, I can do that more quickly without locking the viewer because SUPERText won't have to go get the images of the document every time. Now, if I always want to lock the viewer or always want to leave the viewer unlocked, I can click this tool over here, whose tooltip is Set Window Position and Options as default. So if I click that tool, whenever I open up a search document, whenever I open up a form, it will come up at the position that this one is currently in, let's say over here, and it will come up with the options that I've selected here, including the lock viewer and auto update options, which we'll discuss in a minute. So let me show you how that works. Set that as a default. So now if I open up a form, you'll see that lock viewer is enabled and it came back in that same position. Let's look at the balance of the basic controls on forms. At the bottom of the form, we also have a tool that lets us link external or media files to the record, and this particular tool and external and media links are covered in another video. There is a checkbox that enables us to set the form to auto update, which usually you will want to do and always leave. In fact, it may be that your SUPERText administrator has forced that to be auto update for you. And what that means is that whenever you make a change anywhere in the form, SUPERText will automatically update the associated record. In the toolbar at the top right, the topmost tool, Save Changes Made to the Form, shortcut key F9, lets you at any time force save the changes that you've made inside of the form. You don't really have to worry about using that tool because if the auto update is on, SUPERText will automatically update the changes you made in the form. But if you do use that tool, then what it effectively does, it makes the changes and it closes the form. So for example, if I added something to the note over here and I click that tool, SUPERText will have saved it and closed it. On the other hand, if I make some changes and I forget to save and I go to close, because auto update was on, SUPERText will have automatically updated the record. So in this case, the entry we had has been removed. Now if auto update were not on, so let me take off auto update for some reason, and now I add something, and I go to close the form without using the save button, SUPERText will now give me a warning, do I want to save the changes to the form? And I'll say no, in my example. If it's not my intention to save the changes to the form, whether or not auto update is on, if I make some sort of change, and I change some other fields and a whole bunch of other stuff, and then I decide trash all of that, I want to go back to the starting version of this form, I can use the little garbage can tool, close without saving. It tells me that the changes have been aborted and I'm back to the starting version of the fields on that form. There is a tool over here we call the Ditto tool. Set current field, let me see the tooltip again, set current field to last save value. Control D is a shortcut. Let me show you how that works. If I enter some data in a particular field, in this case I'm going to add something to the notes of this record, added to record, maybe it's doc no one, whatever, and I go to the next record, Control D, or using this ditto function, will simply duplicate the value I last put in the same field. So that's what Control D does. There is a magnified version of that. Instead of just ditto field, which is set current field to last saved value, there is a ditto all. Control L is a shortcut. Now ditto all, for safety reasons, first let me tell you what it does. It will take all of the fields the way you filled them in most recently and duplicate the values in another record. You can only do that for safety reasons if the record you land on has empty values for the fields that you are dittoing all. Let me show you an example of that. If I want to enter some new photographs into my project, and I select the photograph and so forth, I will just do something very quickly so we don't waste too much time, and I will put photo of aircraft and maybe a note. This type of aircraft can land on the road. And I go to enter another one, which in the case when we're using a form for new document records, note there is a shortcut over here, which is control click to save and add another one. So if I control click on a save, I can now enter another one. Now if I click on ditto all, or control A for I think is a shortcut, control L, it sets all of the values to those I previously used or entered. Now let's go back to where we were. Now we also have a tool that lets you paste into the current field. That tool simply lets you paste from the document's clipboard into the field that you have currently selected. We have a tool that clears the contents of a field. So if we had a lot of stuff in here, instead of selecting Control A, if you don't know how to do that, and deleting or or just dragging, I can simply click on the eraser tool to erase the contents of the field. And then we saw previously what this tool was used for, which is to set the window position and options. So the position that I like this window to come up in, the form window, and the options for lock viewer and auto update will be set as a default. And finally, we have some advanced settings over here with the gear tool that your system administrator or SUPERText administrator will deal with, and we don't really deal with those when we're using forms. Now that we've covered the basic tools available on a form, a SUPERText form, let's talk about how we interact and work with the fields and the objects used to work with the fields on the form. Very first thing we see over here, the designer of this form has created an area on this form called System Fields, where they obviously chose to show information that shouldn't be changed about a particular record. So you'll see that it shows up in gray in this particular case, which is typical, and that tells you that's read only, means you cannot change the values by trying to enter anything. SUPERText will tell you that's read only. The area beside here is called an external picture object in SUPERText form, and what this object will show is any pictures that are currently linked to this record. It's got a few controls. For example, maximize lets me take a bigger look at the picture, and if there's multiple pictures, I can move from picture to picture. It's also got the ability to show the picture in the SUPERText view window in case I want to print it or otherwise, and to examine properties of the picture. So that's what that control is. The controls here are, this one is a drop down. A drop down is typically used in a form to force you to select from a list, but to select only one value. And obviously it's document type in this case. Many of the lists in SUPERText, if your administrator has not locked the list, will let you add to the list as you're using it. So for example, if the type of document currently does not appear in my list, if I right click on a drop down, I can now add a new type and do that. It will then afterwards be available in the drop down for me to use on this form. If a field is designated as a SUPERText date field, as the example of this field, the field will be shown to you in English or French, depending on your localization. But when you click in to edit it, you will enter the format. To enter the date is 4 digits for the year, 2 digits for the month, and 2 digits for the day. Now with SUPERText, dates can be ambiguous. So if the date is March 1992, but we don't know which day, I could put a 1992 03. I can put 00 if I don't know, and you see SUPERText interprets that as March 1992. If all I know is it's 1992, I could put 0000, and SUPERText interprets that as 1992. If this document is undated, if I put a -1, which is a SUPERText code for undated, that is different than leaving it blank, because leaving it blank may mean that I've never filled in the date, but putting in a -1 tells me or indicates that I have looked at the document and no date is discernible, so we're going to flag it as undated. So that is a SUPERText date type field, which you can see in various areas of the forms that are given to you. Fields that have vertical scroll bars, typically, it's possible that it doesn't have vertical scroll bars, but still can contain multiple lines, but typically you'll see vertical scroll bars. These fields will enable you to put many lines or paragraphs of text into the field. They typically have a function. If you right click, expand, or F6 is a shortcut, which will let me work with a bigger window. So it's asking me to fill in author on this record. I'm working with a bigger window. I can press F6 when I'm done, or I can click close. So those have an expand function. That's particularly useful. For example, let me show you, I think we can do this search over here and get some videos. Here I have a video. Okay, so we'll open up the form. And now I want to make some notes about the video. So I can use the SUPERText media player to play the linked media. So here's the video. And now what I wish to do is make some notes that maybe reference different positions in a video. So if I press F6 for the expand shortcut, I can actually now work with a big window over here if I wish. Okay, and then maybe I'll make a note over here that this is an old style house. And I can continue and so forth, and when I'm done I can either close that or press F6 again, and the information has gone into the right field. It just enabled me to work with a much bigger window. With these types of fields, it can contain multiple lines, and as I mentioned, typically you will see scroll bars in them. One of the functions that may have been enabled by the form designer, your administrator, SUPERText administrator, is a linked names list, and the shortcut is F8. So let me show you how that works. Let me go to a blank one to show you. And let me see, open this up. And I see here that author is linked to a names list. So if I press F8, what SUPERText does is it pops up a list of all the names currently in our project. Now we can add to this list whenever we want, as long as the list is not locked by your administrator, by right-clicking and selecting new. So as you find new authors in this example, you would add them to the list. Now the advantage that this gives you is you can now standardize the way you select and the way you enter information about authors in this example. So for example, if I wanted to select Evans, I'll type E. To get to the E, click it. And now next I want Brown. I'll go to the B's, control click it. And then I want Smith. I'll go to the S's, typing an S, control click it. The order in which I selected them now and the items that I selected when I click OK will appear as a nice structured entry in my field. So that's a nice way to put in information in a consistent way. Now the names is discussed in the names and monikers are discussed in another video, but the use of this linked list, which we call a names list, is certainly not limited to people's names. You can have a field that tracks, for example, elements of an offense, or you can have a field that tracks if your project is about chemicals, maybe even chemical names. So the idea is in any form where you have a field where you wish possibly more than one entry selected, and you wish the entries to be in a consistent way in terms of how they're named, if the designer of the form has linked that field to a names list, then you can accomplish your objective. This is an example of a multi-valued field in SUPERText. One or more fields in your form may also be linked to one or more monikers lists in SUPERText. And monikers lists in SUPERText are ways of tracking topics, which I'll show you in a moment. You'll know whether it's linked when you right-click in the field and monikers is not grayed out. So if I go to the notes field in my case, I'll see monikers is not grayed out. And I see that the designer of the form has even given me a clue that this field is linked to a monikers list. So if I press F7, I get a list of the current topics associated, and new topics can be added if the list is not locked. And SUPERText is asking me to select for the note field one or more monikers. So I can select one or more monikers, click OK. So not only now do I have these topics linked to this record, whatever the record is, it may be a document, it may be a page record, whatever, or a new document record, but I also have the opportunity to capture some intelligence by entering commentary as to how this deals with carnival address. So 123 Main Street was used for meetings, or how this deals with this topic of use of Betty's phone number. Cell phone 416 was used. So in the future, not only can I retrieve things that deal with these topics by doing appropriate queries in SUPERText, but I can also see how they deal with it based on the intelligence that's being entered by the reviewer. Another type of object that your form may contain is what's called a key lookup object. So in the example of this form, the field called subjects can only be edited by selecting values from a key lookup table. And I know that because the tooltip for that field says double click or right click to edit with key lookup, and also typically the background color of that field will be different. So if I double click, SUPERText opens up the key lookup table that has been specified as linked to this field, and it's prompting us to select the key lookup for the field, in this case called subjects. Any values that I currently have selected for that field, in my case Amilard Jacques, will be highlighted in the key lookup table. And what I can do is I can select one or more, though it may be confined to one by the designer of the form, values from this key lookup table simply by control clicking on them. So in this case I've selected 2. I can control click back on 1 to deselect them, or reselect them by control clicking on them. And once I have selected these objects, I can click save to save those entries into my key lookup field. Again, double click, select the objects, and save. Now there are functions in the key lookup table to edit the entries in a key lookup table and to add new records to the key lookup table. These, as we mentioned earlier in the video, also use SUPERText Forms, these two functions, and they are covered in the video about working with key lookups, including other topics such as searching the key lookup table and so forth. So for the purposes of using forms, double-clicking on a field that is designated as a key lookup will enable you then to select values from the key lookup that will be entered into that field on the form. One or more fields in your form may also be defined as a hyperlink field. In my example, I have 3 hyperlink fields: map, other, and internal. Now, with hyperlink fields, SUPERText will enable you to link either a URL, something on a World Wide Web, or something internal to your own organization, such as another document, to the field. And to do so, you would use the pencil tool. You would specify the URL or the destination in the your network file system. You can also paste in from the Windows clipboard, and you could specify an optional caption, and the name of the caption may be defaulted for you by the form designer, the person that made the form for you to use. And if the field already contains a hyperlink, simply clicking the field will open up that hyperlink. In my case, it's going to open up a browser with aerial photograph. Now, key lookup objects or key lookup fields, SUPERText names lists, and SUPERText monikers lists are known as SUPERText lookup objects. And lookups may be defined in your form as either specific to a project or as common, or a mix of the two. So typically what you need to do before you start working with a form on a project is you need to log into that project by using the tool over here, default location of lookup files, and selecting the project that you're currently working in. And that will tell the form what lookups to use. And whenever you start a new project, you could click add location, specify the project location. I've got one here called new, and from now on the forms would use, until we change the default, would use this new. So you should do that at the beginning of your work to log into the particular project for the 3 lookup types that I just discussed. Now there may be occasions where you want to look at more than one form at the same time, and let me show you how to do that. If I search for something and I open up a form, whether I use the next or previous controls here, or whether I go to open another form, what happens is the form that I had open would close. So there's only one open at a time, because the rule is you're allowed only one form per search window. However, you can have multiple search windows, and there's really no limit on that. So if I just make this a little bit bigger and I open up another search window and I search Jacques again, or whatever I want, and I want to compare or open up a different form, now I can actually have 2 forms open at the same time. So just a little quick tip in case you ever need to do that. It's rare, but it's possible that you may need to do that. Now let's revisit quickly how forms might be used in different modes. So we've been concentrating quite a bit on the search documents screen and how we use forms from it, but forms could equally be used from a table of contents. So let me open up a table of contents, and in the table of contents we have an option that says the navigation action, open form, or direct to document. Let me show you these. Direct to document means that when I open a record, when I'm at the document level, so no more subfolders, and I click it, what should happen? So direct to document means it'll show the document in the view window. But I can switch that anytime I wish. I can click there and select open form. So now when I click on a record, it'll open up the form. Now if the form has a default of lock viewer, the net result will be I also get the view window. I also get the document in the view window. Actually, there was a quicker way of changing that I should have shown you. Instead of going to settings, you can actually change it here. This tool, change talk action to direct to document, or if you're in document mode, change talk action to open form. Earlier in the video, I also showed how a form can be used with a table. So let me open up a table. I showed the example of checks, and I can click the tool over here to open a form. Now, how does SUPERText know what form to use with this table? Well, the first time you use a form with a table, or any time you want to change the form you wish to use, you'll notice that the form tool also has control click to select form. So if I control click, I select a form from the list of forms that are available to me. So suppose I want to do document instead. And I can save it as default for this type of table. So if I select save as default for this type of table, what SUPERText will do is anytime that I have a table that contains these fields, these by name, so it doesn't matter what their content is, but just a table with that mix of fields, it will use that form automatically until next time I choose to select a different form. So you'll see now that we use the regular document form, and you'll see that some of these things are blank because the form that we selected actually has fields that are not in the table. So we didn't actually select a very good form, but nonetheless that shows you the way we can specify what form it is we wish to use when we wish to use a form with a table. And I'll go back to the check form, and there we go. Now similarly, when key lookup tables are made, the person that makes the key lookup table, typically the SUPERText administrator, will pre-select for you what form is to be used when that key lookup table requires a new record or the editing of an existing record. So going back to where we were earlier, when I went to a key lookup field and I asked to, for example, add a new record or edit the current record, SUPERText didn't ask me what form there is. The reason is, or what form I should use. The reason is, I have no choice in this case. The SUPERText administrator, when he made the key lookup table, selected, if I go to, this is an administrator function, don't worry too much about it, but when he or she selected the subject table, key lookup, they specified as well what form is to be used when a new record is added or to be added, or a record is to be viewed in the key lookup table. So that's how SUPERText decides what forms to use with tables and with key lookup tables. So let's look now at the interesting topic of how SUPERText decides what form to use when you're working in the search documents window. Now when you're working with a search documents window, it is possible with that a query or any combination of queries will retrieve all sorts of different types of records. Typically the query could retrieve document records, it could retrieve page records, it can retrieve new document records. There's many different types of things that can be retrieved. So SUPERText needs a mechanism that will enable it to select an appropriate form for each appropriate record type. Normally what you need to do is you need to select automatic form. And what this means is that SUPERText will make a decision using the criteria I will show you momentarily when you ask to open a form for that type of record. So let me do this query. So when I have my form drop down set to automatic and I choose to open this record, SUPERText opens this form. Fine. If I choose to open this record, SUPERText will open a different form. Indeed, if I'm navigating through records, for example, if I'm at this record when I start my process and I go to the next record, SUPERText can actually change the form on the fly to match what's appropriate for the type of record. Now how does SUPERText decide which form to show you when you have automatic set? It does so based on the value of SUPERText system field docrec type. So what SUPERText does is, based on a docrec type, it matches a template that's been defined by your administrator using the template manager in SUPERText, and the template is matched. So for example, if the docrec type is an event, then this form is to be used. So the association between forms and template names is made by the SUPERText administrator, and the SUPERText software then makes an association between the docrec type, which is a system field in SUPERText, and the template name. And when there's a match, it then knows what form to use. And if it cannot find a match, it will prompt you for the form to use. Now there's one interesting qualification. In a special case of docrect type scanned, you can actually have not only a default template, but you can also have a template based on the value of a field in the record. So in my example, I described or created a new template called check that's based on the field type on the record, and if the field name type matches the value check, then the template called check, which uses the form check, is to be used. And if it doesn't, then the default template for docrect type scanned is to be used. And the default template for docrect type scanned is defined for you by the administrator, or you can define it over here, default form for docrect type scanned. So it's likely you won't need to be involved with this decision yourself, because likely your SUPERText administrator has already created the templates and the form associations that are required. But you do need to know that that's how it works, and you do need to know that you do have the ability, irrespective of the automatic association, to explicitly select a different form. So although SUPERText will automatically open the check form for this, there may be reason for me to open the document form for this, and if so, let me see, Acme document should be here, there we go, and if so, SUPERText will then open it against that record. So normally we'll have automatic set, but it is possible to explicitly ask for a different form in certain circumstances. There's one little technique which I want to show you, which could save you a lot of time, and it's especially useful when you're working with a large monitor, a high resolution monitor, or even two monitors. So in this video I won't be able to simulate that exactly, but I want to give you the idea. It's a keyboard shortcut. If I go to view this document, suppose I'm working with a large enough monitor or a dual monitor to always fit the page in a window and to be able to see the page. So imagine that you can now readily read this entire image, entire document, without having to zoom in or zoom out. So when I'm working with a form and I'm entering information in the form, there is a way to control the view window without taking my hands off the home row, without taking my hands off the keyboard. And the way to do that is to use Control Page Down to move through pages in the view window, Control Page Up, Control Page Down, and you can use Control Home, Control End. Control Home goes to the first page of the document, and Control End to the last page. When you combine that with the Control Down arrow key to go from record to record, you can see I can skip to a record. It's showing me a check in this example. I can Control Page Down to see the back of the page, Control Page Back Up. I can Control Up arrow to go to the previous record, and again I can navigate through using Control Page Down, Control Page Up, or Control End to go to the end, or Control Home to go to the beginning. So it's a nifty little keyboard trick that could save you a lot of time. Two last topics, and I think we'll wrap this up. One of them is navigating through the form using a keyboard. You'll notice that the SUPERText administrator who created the form decides which field you will land on when the form is opened, or when you go to a different tab. Now in this particular case, the administrator has intelligently decided it should land on field type, on the field called type, primarily because the other fields up here are read-only, so there's no sense landing on them. You're not likely to be able to change your read-only field, and also because this field, which is the external picture field, is really a mouse type field. So now to move from field to field, I can use the tab key, and to move to a previous field I can press shift tab. So tab moves to the next field, shift tab moves to the previous field. If the field itself can contain a tab, then you need to use Control Tab to get out of it. So I'm going to tab, tab, tab. This one can contain a tab, so I would use Control Tab, Control Tab, Control Tab, or Control Shift Tab, Control Shift Tab to go back. The reason I can't use a tab is because it's legitimate in this field that I can type a tab. So that's a very short topic on using the keyboard tab key to move through fields in your form and in various pages of your form. Now, one last thing I want to discuss is normally you would view fields and work with fields using forms. And a form is designed to show you perhaps just a subset of the fields that's on a particular record. We saw a couple of minutes ago that in the case of check, we had a check form that focused on the check type fields, but it was possible to open the document form that showed me other fields on that same record that might be associated with the document. Now, it is possible to open up a search result using the document record view rather than the form view. Now, document records are covered in another video. But since there is an element of document records that deals with fields, I think we should look at them. Let me open up the document record. And there is a tool here called Show Whole Document. And what this does now is in the top section of the document record, it will show you the values of all the fields currently on that document. Indeed, you can even examine the value of a system field called docRecType, which we discussed earlier. So what did we see in this video? We saw that SUPERText Forms use objects of various kinds to work with the fields in a SUPERText record. We saw that although there is a way to view fields in SUPERText using the document record window, the only real way to work with the fields in terms of changing them or adding to them is using SUPERText Forms. We saw forms are used mostly in Search Documents window when we ask to open the form, but we also saw that they can be used for every type of record, including new document records, page records, and document records. Forms are also used to edit or add to key lookup tables and to regular tables. We also saw how forms are used with tables of contents in SUPERText. We examined the basic controls in the form, including the toolbars and what the various tools do over there. And we also saw that some fields in the form may be defined for you with special objects, such as linked names lists, linked monikers lists, linked key lookup lists, hyperlinks, linked pictures, and finally we examined throughout this video various keyboard shortcuts that are available for those of you that are efficient on the keyboard. Thank you very much for watching, and see you at the next video.